Hattie Big Sky by Kirby Larson. Chapter 1. December 19th, 1917, Arlington, Iowa. Dear Charlie, Miss Simpson starts every day with a reminder to pray for you and all the other boys who enlisted. Well, I say we should pray for the Kaiser. He's going to need those prayers once he meets you. I ran into your mother today at Uncle Holt's store. She said word is you are heading for England soon, France after that. I won't hardly be able to look at the map behind Miss Simpson's desk now. It will only remind me of how far you are from Arlington. Mr. Whiskers says to tell you he's doing fine. It's been so cold I've been letting him sleep in my bedroom. If Aunt Ivy knew, she'd pitch a fit. Thank goodness she finally decided I was too big to switch or my legs would be striped for certain. You should see Aunt Ivy. She's made herself a cunning white envelope of a hat with a bright red cross stitched on the edge. She wears it to all the Red Cross meetings. Guess she wants to make sure everybody knows she's a paid-up member. She's been acting odd lately, even asked me this morning how I was feeling. First time in years she's inquired about my health. Peculiar. Maybe this Red Cross work has softened her heart. Mildred Powell's knitting her fifth pair of socks. They're not all for you, so don't get swell-headed. She's knitting them for the Red Cross. All the girls at school are. But I suspect the nicest pair she knits will be for you. You must cut quite the figure in your uniform. A figure eight, ha ha. Seriously, I am certain you are going to make us all proud. Aunt Ivy's home from her meeting and calling for me. I'll sign off now, but we'll write again soon. Your school friend, Hattie Inez Brooks. I blotted the letter and slipped it in an envelope. Aunt Ivy would think twice about reading anything she found lying around, even if it was in my own room on my own desk. Hattie? Aunt Ivy called again. Come down here. To be on the safe side, I slipped the envelope under my pillow, still damp from my good cry last night. Not that I was like Mildred Powell, who hadn't stopped boo-hooing since Charlie left. Only Mr. Whiskers and my pillow knew about my tears in the dark over Charlie. I did fret over his safety, but it was pure and sinful selfishness that wet my eyes at night. In all my 16 years, Charlie Holly was one of the nicest things to happen to me. It was him who'd stuck up for me when I first came to live with Aunt Ivy and Uncle Holt, so shy I couldn't get my own name out. He'd walked me to school that very first day and every day after. Charlie was the one who'd brought me Mr. Whiskers, a sorry-looking tomcat who purred his way into my heart. The one who taught me how to pitch, and me a southpaw. So maybe I did spend a night now and then dreaming silly girl dreams about him, even though everyone knew he was sweet on Mildred. My bounce around life had taught me that dreams were dangerous things. They look solid in your mind, but you just try to reach for them. It's like gathering clouds. The class had voted to see Charlie off at the station. Mildred clung to his arm. His father clapped him on the back so often I was certain he'd ended up bruised. Miss Simpson made a dull speech as she presented Charlie with a gift from the school, a wool stocking cap and some stationery. Time to get aboard, son, the conductor called. Something shifted in my heart as Charlie swung his foot up onto the train steps. I had told myself to hang back, didn't want to be lumped in with someone like Mildred, but I found myself running up to him and slipping something in his hand. For luck, I said. He glanced at the object and smiled. With a final wave, he boarded the train. Oh, Charlie! Mildred leaned on Mrs. Holly and sobbed. There, there. Charlie's mother patted Mildred's back. Mr. Holly took a bandana from his pocket and made a big show of wiping his forehead. I pretended not to notice that he dabbed at his eyes, too. The others made their way slowly down the platform, back to their cars. I stood watching the train a bit longer, picturing Charlie patting the pocket where he'd placed the wishing stone had given him. He was the one who taught me about those too. Look for the black ones, he told me, with the white ring around the middle. If you throw them over your left shoulder and make a wish, it's sure to come true. He threw his wishing rocks with abandon and laughed at me for not tossing even one. My wish wasn't the kind that could be granted by wishing rocks. And now 2 months had passed since Charlie stepped on that train. With him gone, life was like a batch of biscuits without the baking powder. Flat, flat, flat. Hattie! Aunt Ivy's voice was a warning. Yes, ma'am. I scurried down the stairs. She was holding court in her brown leather chair. Uncle Holt was settled into the hickory rocker, a stack of newspapers on his lap. I slipped into the parlor and picked up my project, a pathetic pair of socks I'd started back in October when Charlie enlisted. If the war lasted 5 more years, they might actually get finished. I held them up, peering through a filigree of dropped stitches. Not even a good chum like Charlie could be expected to wear these. I had a lovely visit with Iantha Wells today, Aunt Ivy unpinned her Red Cross hat. You remember Iantha, don't you, Holt? Hmm. Uncle Holt shook the newspaper into shape. I told her what a fine help you were around here, Hattie. I dropped another stitch. To hear tell it most days, there was no end to my flaws in the domesticity department. I myself never finished high school. Not any sense in it for some girls. Uncle Holt lowered one corner of the paper. I dropped another stitch. Something was up. No sense at all. Not when there's folks like the Antha Wells needing help at her boarding house. There. It was out. Now I knew why she had been so kind to me lately. She'd found a way to get rid of me. She smoothed her skirt again. God moves in mysterious ways. We should not question this bounty from Iantha. Although her comments directly affected me, I knew better than to say anything. Yet. Uncle Holt tamped the Prince Albert tobacco down in his pipe. There are only a few months left of the school year. He lit it and took a puff before continuing. Seems to me it makes more sense for Hattie to finish. This wasn't the first time Uncle Holt had taken my side. I resolved to polish his shoes for him that very night, and thanks for it. Aunt Ivy glided on, and as if Uncle Holt hadn't spoken. It was agreed that Hattie should go where she was needed, and she is needed at Iantha's. And not wanted here, I added, to myself, of course. Uncle Holt squinted at me through curlicues of cherry-scented smoke. Do you want to finish school? I set my knitting on my lap and considered my answer. For all I loved books, school was a chore, especially without the diversions Charlie provided. But compared to working for Iantha Wells, she knows too much already, snapped Aunt Ivy. Or thinks she does. This with a glower in my direction. It's Hattie's soul we must think of. Helping Iantha would foster a spirit of charity in the child. Charity and... Here Aunt Ivy stumbled, as even if she couldn't imagine what working in a boarding house could possibly teach someone like me. And other womanly skills. It's quite the opportunity for a hard-working girl. Two bright red spots glowed on her cheeks. Not much doubt that she was peeved. And not much doubt as to why. It galled her that Uncle Holt would ask my opinion about anything, let alone my own future. I was simply Hattie here and there, with no right to an opinion. I'd been orphaned before I'd lost my baby teeth. Pa's story was a familiar one to any miner's family. The coal dust ate up his lungs. I was just 2 or 3 when he passed. Aunt C took me in when I was 5, after Mama died. The doctor claimed it was pneumonia that took her, but Aunt C claimed it was a broken heart. The kindest of many stops along the way, she gave me the gift of certainty that my parents had loved one another. After Aunt C got too old to keep me, I was shuffled from one relative to another, some of them pretty far down on the shirt tail. I'd stay to help out with this sick person or that until I'd run out of folks who needed help and didn't mind an extra mouth to feed to get in. I was 13 when Aunt Ivy took me in. She's really no aunt at all. Uncle Holt's a distant cousin. She couldn't resist the opportunity to do her Christian duty. Nor could she resist the opportunity to remind me every single day that I had nothing and no one. I should count my blessings, she lectured. Well, I did count them. The first blessing I counted every day was that she and I weren't related by blood. The room grew so quiet I could hear Uncle Holt's pipes click against his teeth. He blew out a puff of sweet smoke and then spoke. I suggest we all sleep on it. Aunt Ivy wouldn't cross Uncle Holt, not in front of me. She flounced in her chair. Whatever you say, Holt. He fussed with his pipe and then with the papers on the stand next to his chair. Where did I put that? Put what, Holt, dear? Aunt Ivy's voice could shatter glass. Letter came for Hattie today. A pile of newspapers cascaded to the floor. For a general store clerk, Uncle Holt read more than any human being I knew. I was crazy about reading myself, but my taste ran to novels. Uncle Holt favored newspapers. He was the one who first warned about war in Europe. Said any fool could see it coming if he'd paid attention. Me, I hadn't paid attention until Charlie up and enlisted. Guess I knew what category that puts me in. A letter, I said. Maybe from Charlie. For Hattie? Asked Aunt Ivy. Uncle Holt ignored her outstretched hand and delivered the envelope directly to me. Whoever is it from? Aunt Ivy demanded. Someone in Montana. Uncle Holt disappeared behind the Arlington News, a signal that he was done with conversation for the evening. I opened the envelope. There were 2 letters inside. The first was dated November 11th, 1917. Your uncle asks that I get the enclosed to you when he passed. It's the least I could do to repay him for his many kindnesses. If you decide yes, me and my husband Carl will help you all we can. Most sincerely yours, Para Johnson Mueller. Decide yes about what? I unfolded the second letter. My dear Hattie, you will no doubt have forgotten me. I am your mother's only brother. Had I married and led a proper life, I would have sent for you long ago. I will not sugarcoat things. I have been a scoundrel. But here in Montana, I've made a new life. Wouldn't you know it, that as soon as I got a claim staked and a place built, the doc here would tell me this cough was going to kill me. You and I have something in common besides the right blood. Neither one of us had a proper home of our own growing up. You orphaned and me leaving home after 6th grade. You will think I have never thought of the niece in Iowa, but this letter will show you that I have. If you come out here to Vida, you will find my claim. I trust you've enough of your mother's backbone to meet the remaining requirements. If you do, and you have 1 year to do it, 320 Montana acres are yours. Oh, I grabbed the arm of the settee. What is it? Bad news? Aunt Ivy was at my side, eagerly peering over my shoulder. With a slight stutter, I read aloud the last paragraph of the letter. Being of sound mind, I do hereby leave to Hattie and Inez Brooks my claim in the house and its contents, as well as one steadfast horse named Plug, and a contemptible cow known as Violet. Signed, Chester Hubert Wright, uncle to Hattie and Inez Brooks. Postscript, H. Bring warm clothes and a cat. Aunt Ivy snatched the letters from my hand. I was too stunned to react. 320 acres? A home of my own? Montana? It's ridiculous, she pronounced. Besides, I promised Iantha you will work for her. Seems like quite an opportunity for a hard-working young girl. There was a whisper of a wink in Uncle Holt's voice. It's insanity, sputtered Aunt Ivy. Holt, not another word. Hattie, as you say, Aunt Ivy, God moves in mysterious ways. I took the letters back from her, folded them, and put them in the pocket of my skirt. If you'll excuse me, I have a letter to write. Paraly's letter was answered with one line. I will come. Telling Charlie took a mite longer. I didn't want him worrying about me while he was over there in France. I believe I struck the right tone in my postscript after only a few dozen tries. Think of how more interesting my letters to you will be, I wrote. I posted both letters, the one to Charlie and the one to Para Mueller. Paraly's return letter arrived promptly and with the promise to meet me at the train depot in Wolf Point and take me on the rest of the way to Uncle Chester's claim. Almost as if she could read my mind, she added to Uncle Chester's brief list of instructions. As far as what to bring with you, your uncle has most everything needed for running a house. A sturdy hat to keep the sun and rain off, and maybe some bed linens, as Chester's are none too choice. Your new neighbor, Para Mueller. A smarter girl than me might have wobbled a bit at the thought of heading west to prove up a claim. I had lived on a farm with some cousins for 6 months, and I helped Uncle Holt with his vegetable garden every year. But that was the extent of my agricultural expertise. I pushed all doubts and worries away the moment they crept into my thoughts. All I could see was the chance to leave Aunt Ivy and that feeling of being the one odd sock behind. Resolute in my decision, I did what any good homesteader must do. I took the $400 my parents had left me out of the bank and bought warm clothes and a $12 ticket on the Great Northern Railway. Packing didn't take long. Uncle Holt gave me his old work boots, and Miss Simpson presented me with a copy of Campbell's 1907 Soil Culture Manual. Her brother had gone out to Montana himself and assured her this was the text any homesteader must have for farming in eastern prairie country. And along with a warm embrace, Charlie's mother gave me a sturdy pair of canvas gloves. My last purchase was a wicker travel case for Mr. Whiskers. Aunt Ivy was still fuming about the whole thing and refused to come to the station. Uncle Holt drove me there in his new Ford town car. I know you can do the work, Hattie. Uncle Holt unloaded my trunk, then handed me Mr. Whiskers in his case. But there'll always be new ways to learn. Don't be too proud to ask for help. He pulled his pipe out of his pocket. You know what Ivy says, pride goeth before a fall, I finished. My pridefulness was a constant source of sorrow and agitation for Aunt Ivy. She'd worn out many a switch trying to cure me of it. Uncle Holt busied himself with filling his pipe and tamping down the tobacco. As he lit it, I thought I saw a dampness in his eye. Thank you, Uncle Holt. 3 years of small kindnesses flashed through my mind. Our gazes caught, and I felt he understood my feelings, even if I couldn't say the words. I promised to write. No pie crust promises now. He patted my shoulder, awkwardly. But it would be good to hear from you, now and again. All aboard, called the porter. Mr. Whiskers and I boarded the train. Uncle Holt stood at the station and waved. I waved back. Then I settled myself in and faced west. Chapter 2. January 1918. On the Great Northern Railway, somewhere North Dakota. Dear Charlie, the first night on the train I couldn't sleep for my excitement. The third night I couldn't sleep for the smell and the din. I can hear you saying that my train ride is nothing compared to your travels overseas. That's true as true, but I'm cross, hungry, and grimy, so I will have my fuss. The book Miss Simpson gave me does not hold my interest. It speaks of work, work, work. I'd rather read the railroad pamphlets, which makes homesteading sound as easy as rubbing a magic lamp. I know there is no genie out there ready to do my bidding. That is why 100 questions bubble up inside me. What shall I do first when I arrive? What is entailed in proving up? What if I can't do it? My mind whirs at the thought of all that must be done. Aunt Ivy would be pleased as Mr. Whiskers with a mouthful of feathers to know I am in such a muddle. I'm afraid I have to rely on that painful teacher, experience, until I get my homestead legs. I looked up from the letter I was writing to Charlie and turned my attention outward. The view as the grimy railcar window was most discouraging. The pamphlet says Montana's the land of milk and honey, I wrote, but you'd never guess from this endless stretch of snow. I'm sure it's different from Uncle Chester's claim. I wondered again about my uncle. I had heard of him, of course, but not much and had never met him. He called himself a scoundrel. What did that mean? What had taken him to Montana? It seemed to me that Uncle Chester's heart could not have been all that dark if he remembered a niece he scarcely knew in his will. I trust you've enough of your mother's backbone, he'd written. I sat up straighter. I had no idea if I had my mother's strength. I knew little more about her than I did about that long-lost uncle. That didn't stop me from imagining her, perhaps even looking down on me now. What would she say? Would she side with Aunt Ivy, or approve of my decision? I wondered, as I had so many times, if it would have been easier to lose my parents when I was still a baby with no knowledge of them at all. The memories I had now were frustratingly faint, whispers of the past. From the one photo I had of them, I knew I'd inherited my father's straight nose and my mother's crooked smile. In what other ways they had made their marks upon me, I had no way of knowing. But surely agreeing to move to Montana to Uncle Chester's claim showed some familial gumption. Mirror, Mr. Whiskers wiggled in his case. You poor puss, I checked Mother's watch, pinned to my bodice. You'll be a free cat soon. The train would arrive in Wolf Point in less time than I'd take bread to rise. I shifted on the seat, trying to discreetly rearrange the folds of my skirt under a very tired rump. The fat man across from me had been snoring loudly, but my movements woke him. I quickly turned my face to the window again. It does make a heart glad to see such country, don't it? He asked. I mumbled a polite response. Where are you headed? He leaned forward, puffing out breath soured with stale tobacco smoke and whiskey. A washboard-thin cowboy slouched in the seat next over. Chimed in. She'd be headed to Helena. That's where all the young ladies aim for. Despite Aunt Ivy's constant warnings not to talk to strangers here in the tight community of the Great Northern Railway car, it seemed bad manners not to answer. I'm going to my uncle's homestead in Vida, I answered. Near Circle. The fat man hooted and slapped his thigh. Child, that's near nothing. Absolutely nothing. He shook his head. Honeyacre, the cowboy mumbled. He tugged his greasy hat farther down on his head. I beg your pardon? Honeyacre, hayseed squatter, it's all the same. The cowboy wielded a wicked-looking knife to pare a chaw of tobacco off the hunk in his hand. Fool farmers think they can make a go of it out here. The fat man swiped his forehead with the grimy handkerchief. My uncle has a lovely farm. I adjusted my new hat. But bumper crops this past year. I cringed a little at my lie, but then I didn't know that Uncle Chester hadn't had bumper crops. God darn railroads! The cowboy spat toward the brass spittoon in the aisle, and nearly made it. The sight made my stomach threaten mutiny. Bet he got suckered by them railroad pamphlets, didn't he? The fat man shook his head. Thought he'd plow up gold coins instead of turnips. My uncle's farm is quite flustered I couldn't come up with the word I wanted. Bountiful. The fat man exploded with such an exceedingly indelicate phrase that my stomach lurched. Blast him, he continued. Him and all them greedy, conniving railroad men making promises Montana can't deliver. His voice pummeled me with its force. Now all the passengers were nodding and murmuring agreement with the dirty cowboy and red-faced fat man. The only one keeping his own counsel was a man in a dark overcoat. My tongue tingled with choice words for these rude men. I clutched my lunch basket closer and reminded myself that a lady should also keep her own counsel. Aunt Ivy had branded that message on my bare legs countless times. Wolf Point! All out for Wolf Point! The conductor stuck his head out in the car. Miss, here's your station. The train slowed, but the fat man's tirade did not. In fact, he reminded me of Reverend Porter at the last tent revival, proud of his 3-hour orations. I tried to shut him out as I gathered my things. Starving to death. Ain't got the sense when to quit, he rattled. If you was my daughter... At that moment the train lurched. I tottered in the aisle, desperate to preserve my balance and my dignity as well as a grip on my bags and my cat. A lady can only bear so much. It had been a long, miserable trip. My patience was as frayed as my second-best dress. Sir, if I were your daughter, I said, looking him full in the face, I would wait until this train started up again and throw myself in front of it. The car fell into stunned silence. Then the cowboy hooted. Looks like she told you a thing or two, Chet. Voice quivering, I managed to say, Good day, gentlemen. As I passed through the doorway, a man's hand grabbed my arm. I beg your pardon. I already regretted my outburst. Now I was probably going to be killed for it. Aunt Ivy had warned me 100 times about the wild men out west. I looked down and saw that the hand belonged to the quiet man in the dark topcoat. Blame their manners on bad whiskey. He tipped his hat. May I say, miss, that I have utmost confidence in your success in this hard land. Thank you. I willed my legs to stop shaking. They did not obey. But my uncle does not have a going concern. I'm sure he does, the man said softly. Sure he does. He stepped back inside the car. I made my way to the corridor and off the railroad car on legs weakened by more than fatigue and anger. It didn't help that Charlie's face appeared before me, awakening memories of the kind and tender ways. Awash in self-pity, I even longed for Aunt Ivy. At least I knew what to expect of her. I thought I'd known what to expect of Montana, that here a person could not only have dreams, but could hold them and they wouldn't shatter. Now I wasn't sure. I turned around, half thinking to jump back on the train. Good luck, miss. The conductor swung my trunk down. And welcome to Montana. Chapter 3. January 3rd, 1918. Wolf Point, Montana. Dear Uncle Holt, a few lines before I say my prayers. To say the trip was an adventure would be a bit like saying you enjoy your newspapers. And after today I can only guess it is the beginning of adventures, not the end. The Muellers indeed met me at the station, though not quite at the appointed time. Isn't it fascinating how long a few minutes seem when you are completely alone, except for a valiant tabby companion, at a strange depot with not a familiar face in sight? You would be proud of me for putting a plan into action when I realized I may have to rely on my own resources. I shivered and tucked my mittened hands under my arms to warm them. I had no idea how long the trip to Wolf Point would be for Paralee and her family, and in this weather. What if something had happened on the way? What if they couldn't come? What if their horse broke a leg and they had no way to travel? What if? My hand went to my mother's watch. I could use some of the right backbone now. My teeth pounded out a frozen rhythm in the icy air. Standing here on the platform was not a reasonable course of action. I might freeze to death before the Muellers arrived. A sign down the way advertised hotel. It was too darn cold to debate much longer. I left my trunk, grabbed my valise and Mr. Whiskers, and started off down the snow-lined street. I was not 10 paces from the train station when I heard a woman's voice. Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hoo! Might you be Hattie Brooks? A few moments later, but certainly true to her word, Paralee Mueller did meet me at the station. Her husband brought the wagon to a creaking stop, and she hopped out. Oh, I was afraid we were going to be late. She hurried to me. Mattie couldn't find Muley. I'm certain she thought this explanation was clear as crystal, but I couldn't fathom one word of it. I managed a weak smile. You must be Paralee Mueller. Paralee was what Aunt Ivy would have called plain. Her long nose sat at odds with her round face. Rusty brown hair scrambled every which way on her head, and she walked with an ungraceful limp. No, Paralee would not turn heads, but when she smiled a welcome to me, I thought her an equal to Babe Daniels, my favorite film star. She took my valise and looked me up and down. Yes, I can see the family resemblance. Really? I touched the brim of my hat. I never met Uncle Chester. He was mighty good to me, she said. We're glad to help you for his sake. She opened her arms as if to enfold me in a hug. I deflected her by holding Mr. Whiskers between us. Her smile flickered uncertainly, then lit up her homely face again. And for my own. You'll be my nearest neighbor. I'm dying for some woman talk. It's so kind of you to meet me, I said, and give me a ride to my new home. Pish posh, Paralee waved her plump hand. It's a badge of honor. New folks are big news around here. I'll be a celebrity for a month. She led me over to the wagon and introduced me to the tall, rugged man in the driver's seat. This is Carl. Guten Tag, Carl nodded. Hello, I stammered, surprised at his greeting. Guten Tag, I replied, using the very little German I had learned in school. Carl smiled, handed Paralee the reins, and strode back the few steps to the platform to get my trunk. He carried it over as if it were full of feathers. Paralee nudged me into the wagon, climbed up herself, and tucked us under a huge woolen blanket. She pointed back to the wagon bed. And this here's Chase. He's 8, and Maddie's 6. She's our little magpie, and the baby's Fern. Hello, children. I counted heads, but which one's Muley? Maddie held up a rag doll with a distinct bald spot on her black yarn head. Why, she's right here. The doll danced a jig in Maddie's mittened hands. She says she's very pleased to meet you. There was something so serious in Maddie's tone that I returned the greeting solemnly. And I am very pleased to meet you, Muley. Hello, Miss Brooks. Chase stuck out his hand. I shook it. I've been feeding Violet and Plug for you. It took me a moment to recall that Violet and Plug were the animal part of my legacy from Uncle Chester. We've got them at our place, explained Paralee. Chase can bring them over as soon as you get settled. At that moment, little Fern began to wail. Carl finished loading my things, and we headed toward the hotel. He led us out in front and rode on to the livery stable. We hurried into the lobby to get out of the cold. Erickson's isn't fancy, said Paralee, but the food's good. It's too far to head back tonight. We'll start out after breakfast. She managed to unwrap baby Fern from the blankets, help Maddie out of her coat, and scold Chase for peeking in the brass spittoon, all in one breath and motion. How long a ride is it? My heart squirreled in my chest at the thought of my new home, now within reach. Oh, we'll be there by supper time tomorrow, Paralee rounded up her wayward chicks. I'd better take the children upstairs. That's fine, I said. I have some business in town. I'm to see a Mr. Ebgard. I relinquished Mr. Whisker's case to Chase. About the claim and such. Can we pet him, Hattie asked, crouching down to peer into the case. When I get back, I said. He needs to settle in a bit. Ebgard's office is a few doors down that-a-way, Paralee pointed. Why don't you pop back over to the hotel when you're done, then I can help you with your shopping. Oh, don't trouble yourself. She didn't need one more chick to watch over. I can manage. We'll see you at supper, then. She herded the children upstairs. Mr. Ebgard was assisting someone else when I arrived, so I settled myself on the one spare chair. That looks like everything, Tom, Mr. Ebgard said to the careworn man across from him. You got the final filing fee? Tom counted out the bills onto the desk. Highway robbery, he shook his head. $37.75 for paperwork, after I've already paid $22 to open the claim. I'm not getting rich off you, Tom, Mr. Ebgard put down his pen. My commission's only $2. Not saying nothing against you, Ebgard. Tom laughed and stood up, but there's not much free about this free homestead land. Mr. Ebgard shook his hand. Congratulations, Tom. You are now the proud owner of 320 Montana acres. Good luck. Tom tipped his hat to me as he passed by. Morning, ma'am. I nodded back. May I help you? Mr. Ebgard held out his recently vacated chair. I'm Hattie Inez Brooks. I sat, hoping to appear more mature than I felt. Niece to Chester Brooks. I showed him Uncle Chester's letter. Most unusual, Mr. Ebgard shook his head. Most unusual. Sir? I don't know. He tapped the pen against his mustache. How old are you? 17. I squirmed at the fib. How old? 16. Good heavens, the pen dropped. What was Chester thinking? There didn't seem to be any way for me to answer the question, so I didn't. Why on earth did your mother let you come? He demanded. She's dead, sir. I touched Mother's watch, still pinned to my bodice. My father, too. All right, then. Mr. Ebgard seemed strangely approving of those revelations. Heir. And head of household. He swiveled around in his chair and began to rummage through a wooden file cabinet. Watson, Williams, Wyatt, too far. Here it is, right, Chester Hubert. He held the paper closer. This claim's about 30 miles from here, about 3 from the nearest town, which is Vida. He smiled. Town is a pretty big word for Vida. You have a way to get out there? I nodded. Carl and Paralee Mueller. Good folks. They'll watch over you. He swiveled back to his desk. Your uncle tell you that you need to cultivate 1/8 of this claim. That's 40 acres. He squinted over his glasses at me and set 480 rods of fence. My stomach flip-flopped, and my mouth went dry as flannel. 40 acres? Uncle Holt's garden was a postage stamp in comparison. And 480 rods of fence? I couldn't even fathom how much that would be. Sounded like enough to build a fence from here back to Arlington. He did mention the need to fulfill requirements. Not many, but vital. He ticked off his points. 1, you must build and fence. Chester's done the building, I hear. Don't know about the fencing. He put up his forefinger. 2, you got to cultivate. Most folks go for flax at first, easier to plant. As I said, 1/8 of the claim. His middle finger stood at attention next to the first. And 3. His ring finger joined the others. It's all got to happen in 3 years. Chester staked his claim in November of 1915, so that gives you... He glanced at the Citizens National Bank at Wolf Point calendar behind his desk. 10 months to finish proving up. And don't forget the final fees. I managed a wobbly smile. I know. $37.75 for free land. Mr. Ebgard stopped shuffling papers and looked up at me. He laughed. Quick learner. He scribbled something in his ledger book. Miss Hattie and Ez Brooks, I sure hope to see you here in this office in November. Me too. I stood up. He stood up too and offered his hand. Take good care of yourself, young lady. You need to lay in some supplies. That was my next task. I said. Head over to Hanson's Cash Grocery. Mr. Hanson will give you a fair deal. Mr. Ebgard's door opened again, and he turned his attention to the man coming in. I tried not to stare, but the newcomer was most eccentric. A thick, shoe-polished black beard hung to his waist. Wire-brush eyebrows, dusted with snow, rested atop a pair of eyes that looked 30 years younger than the face in which they were set. An improbably long patchwork scarf was wrapped around his neck, and a fur hat perched askew on his large head. He wore no fewer than 3 coats, all of them of fabrics and colors I'd certainly never seen in Arlington. Miss Hattie and Ez Brooks, allow me to introduce another of your neighbors. This here's Mr. Jim Fowler. Ebgard, don't you go confusing the girl, Mr. Fowler peeled off a glove and stuck out a paw. Everybody calls me Rooster Jim. Shouldn't be no different for you. How do you do? I took Mr. Fowler's Rooster Jim's hand and shook. Mr. Ebgard's office was suddenly quite potent. It seemed Rooster Jim may have come by his nickname for his barnyard aroma. I hope you play chess, Rooster Jim let my hand drop. I got mighty accustomed to whooping Chester at that game. I'm sorry, I fished a handkerchief from my pocketbook and held it to my nose. I don't play. It won't be no trouble to teach you, Rooster Jim chuckled. Won't mind a bit. Well, thank you. But I think I'll be awfully busy. I edged toward the door. Busy trying to stay warm, Rooster Jim crowed at his own joke. That's the prime entertainment in these parts. That and staying cool come summer. Now, Jim, don't scare the poor girl away, Mr. Ebgard smiled at me. She's only been here a few hours. Well, neighbor, I'll let you be about your business. See you over to the homestead. Mr. Jim removed 2 of his overcoats, and another odoriferous wave crashed over the room. Yes, fine, thank you. I nodded goodbyes to both men and hurried outside. Now the cold air felt heavenly, exactly what I needed to clear my thoughts. A chess-playing, pungent neighbor was the least of my worries. What had Mr. Ebgard said? 40 acres of crops? 480 rods of fence? I took a deep breath of the wintry air and pulled my shawl closer around me. No sense borrowing trouble, that's what Uncle Holt always said. Besides, in her first letter, Paralee said she and Carl would help me. I talked to them tonight. Surely they'd be able to answer many of my questions. I would take it one step at a time. If others could prove up on their homestead claims, there was no reason why I couldn't as well. Hanson's Cash Grocery and Bakery was directly across the street. No doubt a short trip on a balmy spring day. Now, however, the snowdrifts tugged at my wool skirt as I wobbled my way along a packed and icy trail. I felt like a tightrope walker, balancing the urge to hurry out of the cutting wind and the need to step carefully so as not to fall on my hind regions. I slipped and slid. teeth chattering all the while, until I found sure footing on the swept wooden steps. Warmed by the efforts of this short walk, I pulled open the door and stepped inside. The smell, dill pickles mixed with tobacco and peppermint, took me right back to Uncle Holt's store. The clerk was helping another customer when I entered. He nodded to me but kept his attention on the plump woman at the counter. I'm not certain, Mr. Hanson, whether this yellow silk flatters my features, she fussed. Perhaps the dove gray is better. You'll be a ray of sunshine in the yellow, he assured her. I fought back a smile. Ray of sunshine. More like a lightning bolt. I browsed the shelves while Mr. Hanson worked with the older woman. When she finished, she and her length of yellow silk swept out of the store without so much as a how do you do to me. Good afternoon. I stood up taller. Mr. Ebgard said you could help me put together some supplies. Let me see. You wouldn't be Chester's niece, would you? Why, yes, I am. Welcome, neighbor. Mr. Hanson shook my hand. Paralee sent a word to tell me to take good care of you. He smiled. She'd mother hen the whole country if she could. He stepped out from behind the glass counter. My stocks are low right now, and we've got those darn flour and sugar limits. But I believe we can put you together a kit. He began to assemble items at an alarming rate. He must have caught my panicked expression. Young lady, when it's 65 below and your front door is froze shut, you'll be glad for this 20 pounds of beans. Soon I had my stores, a quarter barrel of wheat flour, 15 pounds of cornmeal, 20 pounds of coffee, kerosene, raisins, and other dried fruits, a tin of loose tea, some tinned meats, canned goods, and an assortment of spices. Most I can tell you is 25 pounds of sugar, apologized Mr. Hanson. The war. That should be fine, I said. I couldn't imagine using that much sugar. Mr. Hanson added the sugar sack to the pile on the counter, then clicked his tongue in satisfaction. This should hold you. Me and 50 others, I laughed. If only Charlie could see me now. One medium-sized girl with enough supplies for his whole regiment. The door swung open and Paralee bustled inside, bringing a blast of cold air with her. Thought I'd find you here. She inspected my stores and gave approval. That silver leaf lard's the best for baking, she said, patting the number 5 tin. You'll also need some feed for Violet and Plug, though. Mr. Hanson tallied another set of figures. I counted out 14 of my precious $5 bills. Paralee turned to Mr. Hanson, tugging the lid of the covered basket she'd been carrying. A heavenly fragrance filled the room. I'm running low on coffee. She reached into her basket. Can I trade you for 2 strudels? Mr. Hanson began to rub at an invisible spot on the glass counter. I don't know, Paralee. Folks don't want much to do with anything German. The war. Mr. Hanson shook his head. I have to call my sauerkraut Liberty Cabbage in order to sell it. But I won a blue ribbon at the county fair for this strudel. The shopkeeper lowered his voice. Maybe you'd better stop making it for a while, he said, and tell Carl to... The shop door creaked open. An icy gust announced another customer. Mr. Hanson didn't finish his sentence. I can let you have some coffee, he said quietly to Paralee, on credit. Paralee closed up her basket. No, thank you, Carl. Her voice grew louder with this word and nearly cracked. My husband is a good provider. We don't need credit. Paralee. Mr. Hanson reached out a hand to her. He will be in soon to load Hattie's supplies in the wagon. She turned and left the store. I followed her but hesitated outside the door. She was down the street before I could think of anything to do or say. I recalled the one letter I'd gotten from Charlie so far, written before he went overseas. He'd been full of spit and vinegar about the bayonet the army had given him. I'm ready to take on the Kaiser himself, he'd written. The war and our enemies were far away, like Charlie now in France. Surely Mr. Hanson understood that. Besides, couldn't he smell the cinnamon and apple perfume wafting out from Paralee's basket? I think even President Wilson would have been tempted. Since it was noon, I stopped for dinner at the OK Cafe. After my ham sandwich, pie, and coffee, I put 5 cents on the table and stepped back outside. Despite the cold, I was determined to spend a bit of the afternoon exploring Wolf Point. At 30 miles from my claim, it wasn't likely I'd be back often. The imposing brick Sherman Hotel reigned from the far end of town. It fronted a town park complete with bandstand. Where the walks were swept clean of snow and ice, I could see they were concrete, not wooden. Modern life had come to Wolf Point in other ways too. The Wolf Point Motor Company had advertised Buick, Chevrolet, and Dodge motor cars. I scurried past the farmer's telephone company to pop into the Citizens National Bank to open an account. Next door was Huxell Drugs, where I bought a jar of Pond's cold cream. These few errands left me chilled to the bone, so cold that not even the window displays at the clothing store called The Fad could draw me in. Though I hadn't seen the entire town, my numb feet announced that my tour was completed. I hurried back to Erickson's hotel, asked for a cup of tea to take to my room, and wrote letters until supper at 6. I treated everyone to a roast beef supper at the hotel. It didn't help my finances any, but it seemed only right. The least I can do for all that you've done for me, I said when Paralee protested. I wanted to start fresh in Montana, not owe anyone anything. That way they couldn't remind me of it, like Aunt Ivy and all the other relatives that I lived with. Supper proved to be the best part of the long day. The children were good as gold, and Paralee talked up such a storm that all Carl and I had to do was sit back and get warmed by the breeze. She didn't say a word to Carl about what had happened in the store. Leastwise, not that I heard. After supper, we said good nights as they headed to their room and me to mine. Mr. Whiskers snored softly at the foot of the bed, and I wore my old flannel gown and said my prayers just like always. But as I lay my head down to sleep, I knew that nothing would be just like always again. I'd boarded that train, Hattie here and there, but stepped off in Wolf Point, Hattie Homesteader. Someone with a place to belong. Someone whose wish might come true. With that sweet thought curling around my head like Uncle Holt's pipe smoke, I fell right to sleep. Chapter 4. January 4th, 1918. My new home. 3 miles north and west of Vida, Montana. Dear Charlie, I'm not officially at my home yet. In fact, we haven't even left Wolf Point. There's much to be done to get 3 children ready for a wagon ride. I am lingering over a second cup of coffee while Paralee and Carl shepherd their flock. If my penship doesn't meet Miss Simpson's standards, it's because my hands are shaking with excitement. Soon they will be shaking with cold. Even packed together in the wagon with woolen blankets to our noses, we are certain to be icier than the inside of Logan's ice house. Oh, I'm being summoned. This will be finished later, from my new home. I hope you don't get tired of reading these words, for I feel I shall never tire of writing them. It was hustle and bustle, getting everyone washed and dressed and breakfast. Finally, great, children and cat were loaded into the wagon. With a small thrill in my stomach, I crunched through the snow and swung myself up next to Paralee. I was on my way to my new home. Carl clucked at the horses and they started off. I was grateful for the ride out to Uncle Chester's homestead. But what with Mr. Whiskers, Paralee, the 3 little ones, Carl, me, and my kit, there was hardly room to breathe in that wagon. Not that you could do much breathing in the stinging January air. Paralee, the children, and I snuggled deep under blankets. Carl's face was a chapped red mask as he drove, steady on through the flat, treeless country. He's shy about speaking English in front of folks he doesn't know well, Paralee told me to explain his silence. He hates making mistakes. I always tell him the only bad one he's ever made was marrying me and taking on my kids. She laughed and Carl shook his head. Paralee patted her middle. Come summer, he'll have his own child. Mama, look there! Chase pointed off to the left. The wagon road had twisted down into a shallow coulee. We were tucked between 2 banks of a long-ago river. On the near side of the left bank, a wolf posed against the bitter blue sky. I cleared my throat. Are wolves a problem here? I'm not afraid of wolves, said Chase. I'd shoot one if it came too close. Have you ever had to? Shoot one? I asked. Nowhere in the vast array of purchases for Mr. Hanson was a gun. Maybe Uncle Chester had one lying around. Not that I know how to use it. They won't bother you, Paralee said. They get hungry, like that one there, and they go after calves or sheep. Not sweet young Iowa schoolgirls. She poked me in the ribs and laughed heartily at her own joke. I wrapped my shawl more snugly around my face, as if that piece of wool could protect me from wolves and whatever other dangers lay ahead. All that peeked out there were my eyes, watering from the cold. I'd figured out the trick of breathing in through the woolen scarf to warm the sharp air before it stabbed my lungs. My feet felt like clumps of ice at my ankles. 2 pairs of woolen socks provided a meager shield against this Montana cold. Shifting on the wooden seat sent a tiny surge of warmth through my veins and gave me a better angle to study the landscape through the narrow slit between scarf and hat. How would I describe this scene to Charlie? So far there had not been one tree to enliven the view. To say the land was flat was not quite true, though that would be the quick and the easy assessment. No, it more resembled a giant's quilt, white, of course, because of the several feet of snow spread out over an enormous bed. Here and there were the bumps made by the giant's toes or knees. In the distance, his covered head raised above a larger bump in the bedding. As I studied longer, I could see the creases where the quilt fell away from between his arms and sides. No, not flat in the tabletop sense of the word. Remember that sheet cake I baked for your birthday last year? I could write Charlie. Montana's a bit smoother of surface, but not much. I turned to find Paralee studying me. Chester's eyes were the same hazel color, she said. Of course, he didn't have no hair, but I suspect it was chestnut like yours when he was younger. She seemed lost in herself for a moment. What was he like? I asked. Paralee pursed her lips. Quiet. But if he ever said something, folks would listen. And Lord, did he read. That man was a regular library. She smiled at some memory. But there was a sadness in him. Never knew what the trouble was, but no matter how big his smile or loud his laugh, you could hear the hurt underneath. Was he alone? I tried to envision this uncle I never knew with my eyes and no hair. When he died, I mean. A tender smile flickered on Paralee's face. A man like Chester? No, he was not alone. Me and Carl were there. Leafy Purvis and Rooster Jim, too. She patted my arm. He talked about you, Lord Almighty, right up till the very end. He'd be so pleased to know you had come. We rode in snow-tipped silence for several minutes. I wish I'd known him, I said aloud. You would have been fast friends, Paralee pronounced. That thought comforted me. At least it comforted my soul. Comforting my body, however, was a completely different cup of tea. The glamour of my mode of transportation had dimmed considerably since leaving Wolf Point. This icy jostling wagon ride had shaken the last bit of humor right out of my bones. The same bones through which, at least according to Uncle Chester, coursed some of my mother's starch. But that starch was frozen solid by the time we reached my new home. There it is, Chase called, excitement and cold shrilling his voice. Mr. Wright's house. I looked in disbelief. House was a Charlie term, kind and generous. Aunt Ivy's chickens had better accommodation. The structure wasn't much bigger than Uncle Holt's tool shed and was put together with about as much care. Gaps in the siding revealed black tar paper like decay between haphazard teeth. 2 woodblock steps led up to a rough hewn door. A small window, the only window, I was to find out, left of the door, stared dully at me. My own gaze in return was no doubt equally as dull. Carl slowed the wagon. Home sweet home, Paralee chirped. We'll help you get your things inside, sugar, but we can't stay. It's getting dark. We need to get on home. Home sweet home, I croaked. This cockeyed, slapped together 9-foot by 12-foot claim shack, my home. Oh, schnee, Carl muttered as he swung open the door. Snow. Oh, dear. Paralee stamped snow off her shoes. No one plugged the keyhole. Even in the gloom, I could see an icy slash of white that the wind had forced through the keyhole and across the cabin floor. It was as if nature herself had drawn a line to keep me out. I fought back the urge to throw myself on Paralee's mercy and beg to go home with them. Maddie slipped her tiny hand in mine. You can sweep that up, boil it, and make coffee, she said. Paralee smiled proudly. Out of the mouths of babes. I sure can. I cleared the tears out of my throat. Thank goodness I packed a broom. That's the spirit, Paralee patted my arm. I know it don't look like much. Claim shacks never do. After you get proved up, you can work on a proper house. Do you? Wouldn't it be bad manners to ask Paralee if she lived in such a shack? I mean, have you proved up? Sugar, I'm an old-timer, Paralee laughed. I have a cozy house now. But everyone started out like this, or worse. She shifted Fern to her other hip. My folks had a soddy. You know, a house built from bricks of sod. It was warm in the winter and cool in the summer, but oh, the bugs. And dirt. Dirt everywhere. She took a handkerchief from her pocket and wiped at Fern's drippy nose. Trust me, this is a castle compared to a sod house. Chase burst in through the door, a blast of cold air on his heels. Here, Miss Brooks, I fetched you some water. for washing and such tonight. He set the bucket on the stove. Why, thank you, Chase. I was surprised by his kind act. Your well's right out there. He pointed. You'll need to fetch more in the morning. Dost he thost, last. Carl brought in the last of my boxes. Right, said Paralee. She turned to me. We've got to go, hun. Mr. Whiskers complained from his carrying case. He didn't seem any too pleased with our accommodations either. I'd leave him inside for a few days, advised Paralee. He's a pretty tough old puss, I said. He can handle the cold. No, dear, Paralee patted my arm. Because of the mice. I shuddered. In the house? Chester was none too neat, and the house had been vacant a while, and I held up my hands. No more ands. I held up my hand. No more ands. Paralee hooted with laughter. Sugar, you are a stitch. She handed me a lamp and my small box of books. Carl passed over a covered dish wrapped in a towel and one of the strudels. Get the fire lit, said Paralee, and you can heat this up for your supper. You've done too much, I protested, but Paralee covered her ears. At least let me repay you. I reached for one of the bags of coffee beans. Please, in trade. Her hands hovered in the air for a moment, then she took the coffee. I'd say the family resemblance goes beyond looks. She reached out to wrap me in another hug. This time I didn't back away. With the jingle of the harness, they were off. I watched until they were a speck on the horizon. Yow! Mr. Whiskers sounded pretty insulted at this step down in his living arrangement. The shack. Oh, it was a shack. No poetry of home and hearth allowed. Was a flimsy cage, keeping me in and very little else out. The essentials appeared to be present. Stove, coffee pot, bread pan, skillet, and such. Plus a few rough and splintery shelves for storage. I collapsed in a nerve-worn heap on the floor. I imagined my first letter home. I told you, Aunt Ivy would say as she snapped it under Uncle Holt's nose. Nothing good would come of this Montana mania. She's living worse than our hogs. I wanted nothing better than to lose myself in a good long cry, but the floor, in addition to being dirty, was cold. Dear God, I cried out, what should I do? I leaned my forehead on my upraised knees. A tear trickled out onto my woolen traveling skirt. Then something happened. I heard an answer to my prayer. Pick yourself up, Hattie, Inez Brooks, said a voice in my head, and get a fire lit before you freeze what's left of your brains. The message stunned me into action. I brushed myself off, lit a lamp, and began to make some sense of my new home. The broom got put to good use as I tried not to think about what the little hard pellets in the growing dust pile meant. A low growl rolled up from the back of Mr. Whisker's throat. He crouched in front of the stove, tail twitching wickedly. Suddenly the tail stopped and his right paw flew out. There was a tiny squeak, almost fairy-like, and then Mr. Whiskers ran into the far corner. I could hear him crunching away. I drew a shaky breath. All right, then. I fumbled for matches to light the fire. You've got your supper, Mr. Whiskers. I best get mine. A chipped enamelware pail by the stove held a fat collection of juniper kindling. I loaded the stove with twigs. Soon the juniper crackled fragrantly. On the ride out, Paralee had explained that homestead fires were fed with dried buffalo chips. The buffalo are gone, she'd said, but thank goodness for their calling cards. I slipped on the work gloves that had been a gift from Charlie's mother and reached into an old lard bucket filled with dark objects. I swallowed my pride and tossed them quickly in the stove. Soon the little shack was tolerable, that is to say, as long as I kept moving, my innards would not freeze solid. I'd followed Maddie's advice and scooped the top layer of intruding snow into the coffee pot, now heating on the stove. To the back of the range, I set this dish of Paralee's stew to warm. Since Aunt Ivy had been reluctant to trade in her wood cook stove, I was well versed in how to use one, at least for cooking. Baking was beyond me. I rounded up some cutlery and found the table, which had been buried under a stack of dime novels and Shakespeare's plays. Uncle Chester and I shared one right trait. We loved our books. Now that I was thawed out a bit and saw the little shack lit up by my trusty kerosene lamp, I could see that every shelf and surface was covered with books, newspapers, and old magazines. What Uncle Chester had lacked in niceties, Aunt Ivy would be horrified to find not one doily in the entire room. He'd made up for in reading materials. Under a goodly pile of the Dakota Farmer, Popular Magazine, and Saturday Evening Post magazines, I found a serviceable empty wooden crate that was recruited as a bookcase. An old rag, lukewarm water, and elbow grease soon brought a sheen to the table. I set out an enamelware plate and a tin fork and spoon. Just like the Vanderbilts, I told Mr. Whiskers. He bellied up onto the stove to warm himself after his first course. There was no chair, but an upturned empty lard bucket suited me fine. I wonder if this had been Uncle Chester's favorite perch as well. By the time my supper was hot, Uncle Chester's house, my house, was on its way to being cozy. I poured myself a mug of coffee and Mr. Whiskers a saucer of tin milk. Here's to our new home, I toasted. Thinking of the Almighty's earlier guidance, I bowed my head. Thank you, Lord, for Uncle Chester. May he rest peacefully in your care. Thank you for Paralee, who provided this good supper and for keeping me safe thus far. Mr. Whiskers thanks you for the mouse. Amen. I dug in, spoon clinking against the plate. The stew tasted of sage and carrots and hope. The flavor lingered on my tongue long after the place was empty. I let Mr. Whiskers lick clean while I sliced Paralee's strudel. It was even more delicious than it smelled. I shook my head, thinking of Paralee's trouble trying to trade in town. People were gosh darn thick-headed sometimes. A rhythmic rasping told me Mr. Whiskers was sound asleep. It had been a long day. I dipped a few ladles of warm water from the stove's reservoir into the largest enamel bowl, then dropped in a bar of soap and rolled into a lather. I quickly washed up my few dishes, then ladled clean water over each item to rinse off the suds. The dishes rested briefly on a clean flour sack towel while I dug another out of my things. Never let it be said that I let my dishes air dry. When everything was set to rights, I turned to making ready my bed. Because of the tight quarters, the whole house would have fit in Aunt Ivy's parlor. The bed had been hinged to the wall. I pulled the bed down. Uncle Chester's bed linens were fit for rags and barely that. I briskly made it up using the one set of sheets I'd brought. Within minutes of my banking the fire, the inside temperature took a huge step down the ladder. Hope we don't turn into icicles, I said to Mr. Whiskers. He jumped up on the bed. I pulled off my skirt and blouse and yanked down a flannel nightgown, singing at the top of my lungs to keep warm. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching off to war. Bellowing and marching in place, I blew out the lamp and hopped into bed. After a few minutes, I hopped right back out. I added several layers of clothes, a hat, and 2 pairs of socks. Finally, with Mr. Whiskers curled at my feet, I warmed up enough to fall asleep. I woke, bleary-eyed and hungry and cold. I started out of bed, then snagged the quilt to wrap around my shoulders. Brrr! I bounded across the cold floor to the stove. I could chisel out the air in here and use it for ice in my lemonade next summer. Meow! Mr. Whiskers scrabbled his way under my blankets and made a nest for himself in my bed. Don't get any ideas. I blew on last night's embers in the stove. I've got to fold that up there so there's room to move. I jumping jacked to the chip barrel and tossed a handful onto the embers. Let's get something warm inside us. Quick! I grabbed the coffee pot. Then I remembered the water was outside, the very cold outside. I began to bundle up. Lesson number 1. Bring in a bucket of water each night for coffee in the morning. Mr. Whiskers purred his agreement. Any cowboy passing by at that moment might have fallen off his horse had he seen me step out the front door. Dressed in every stitch of clothing I could find, I suspect I looked like Maddie's rag doll, shuffling my way down the icy steps and across the snowy yard to the well. The inside of my nose stung as I breathed in the icicled air. My eyes watered so much I could barely see the pump handle. To stay warm, I jiggled from one foot to the other. It was too cold to think. All the jiggling was reminding me of something else rather important. I'd run out to the necessary the night before, right before bed. It had seemed a long way then, and it was even longer now, and certainly no warmer. I'd gotten awfully spoiled at Aunt Ivy and Uncle Holt's with their indoor plumbing. One more thing to get used to in Montana. I quickly used the facility. Slipped off my mittens to grab a piece of the Monkey Ward catalog to dry off, and hiked up my underthings. I hurried back to the well and began to pump. It took a significant amount of muscle. How Chase with his little 8-year-old arms managed, but soon I had a bucket full. That hot cup of coffee was one step closer. I tried to let go of the pump handle and couldn't. My naked hands, damp with the morning air, were firmly connected to the metal. Ouch! My gyrations made my freezing hands raw and sore, and I was still stuck. Now my feet were tingling and itching with the cold, too. I imagined them puffed up black inside my boots. My teeth chattered hard enough in my head to loosen each and every one. I was probably going to be the first homesteader ever to die from extreme stupidity. An image of my skeleton being discovered some spring spurred me into action. I began to tug and twist with renewed fervor. "Hey there, Miss Hattie," a young voice called out. "What you doing?" Into view rode Chase. He was astride one of the horses from Carl's wagon team and leading a large boxy horse and a brown cow with white spots. Oh, hello, Chase. If I hadn't been stuck to the pump handle, I would have thrown myself down the well rather than bear this humiliation. I seem to be in a pickle. He slipped off his horse and tethered him to the well bracing. Mama keeps an old mitten tied to the handle, he said, in the winter. Yes, well, that's a wonderful idea, but the sentence hardly needed finishing. Chase ran inside and fetched the small bit of water left in the stove reservoir. He poured it slowly over my hands. Oh! The sudden warmth sent shooting pains into my knuckle and joint. My hands slipped free and I tucked them under my arms. That hurts. Chase picked up my bucket and took my arm. Come on inside, Miss Hattie. You better get warmed up. I fell against my lard can chair, a frozen, useless lump, while this 8-year-old boy bustled around my shack. He stoked the fire, put coffee on, fed Mr. Whiskers a saucer of tinned milk, and fetched me another pail of water to fill the reservoir. Have you had any breakfast? I asked him. A mug of coffee finally cradled in my hands. Yes, ma'am. Well, I haven't. Can you eat a second? Not bothering to wait for an answer, I flipped open the pamphlet Mr. Hanson had tucked in with my purchases. Put out by the Royal Baking Powder Company. Best wartime recipes. Was packed with ways to cook, to save flour, eggs, and such, with the war going on. What with the war going on? I measured 2 coffee mugs of buckwheat flour into a bowl, stirred in 4 spoonfuls of royal baking powder, the only kind Aunt Ivy ever used, and half a spoonful of salt. Could you reach 2 tins of milk from that shelf there? Chase handed them to me, and I added the milk, slowly, to the flour mix, as the recipe said. I licked my fingers and touched them to the greased frying pan heating up on the stove. Sss! It's sizzling, all right. I stuck my stinging fingers in my mouth. One thing I could make was flapjacks. Soon a stack rose on each of our plates, and we ate. Warm, full, and humbled, I pushed back my plate. So your mama ties a mitten to the pump handle, I said. Anything else I should know before I do some other foolish thing? Somehow I didn't feel like such a failure talking with Chase this way. I prayed he didn't tell Carl and Paralee what a featherbrain the new neighbor was. Chase relished his role as teacher, and for the next hour showed me this trick and that of homestead life. Use the juniper sparingly, he said after peeking in my kindling barrel. It's hard to come by. When we'd finished my hearth and home lesson, he took me out to the barn and helped me get Violet and Plug settled. Do you know how to milk a cow? He asked. That's one thing I do know how to do, I said. One of my stays had been with a second cousin dairy farmer. Violet's kind of cranky. Chase patted the cow's broad flank. Watch out for her tail. Will do. Chester gave us her calf. I named her Fawn because she looks like a baby deer I saw once over to Glendive. That's a wonderful name. I gave Violet a pat, though more tentative than Chase's. Chase gave me a few more instructions about Plug. He's a good old range horse and can practically take care of himself, he said. I better head on back, Miss Hattie, or Mama will fret. I walked him back out to the yard where he'd left his horse. How can I thank you? I was so touched by how easily he and his family had taken me under their wing. You can give me a boost up, he lifted up his foot. I cupped my hands and he stepped into them, and up he went. Tell your mama hello from me. I will. Chase wheeled his horse around. Thanks for breakfast, Miss Hattie. And with that, my 8-year-old knight in shining armor rode off. I went straight into the house, rummaged through my things, found an old mitten, and went out and tied it to the pump handle. That night my prayers were full of thanks. For Chase and Paralee and for lessons learned, I said. But Lord, if you could help me not learn every lesson the hard way, I'd sure appreciate it. Amen. Mr. Whiskers meowed his amen to that too.